All right, let's dive in. We've got this Bain report all about India's pharma industry, and wow, it's pretty fascinating stuff. We're talking about India's goal to, become like a global pharma powerhouse.
Yeah.
And yeah, some pretty ambitious goals they've got.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how big of a player India already is. The report points out that they're like the world's biggest supplier of generic medicines. Like 20% of the global demand. That's huge.
Wow.
But they're not, they're not stopping there. Their goal is to reach like $350 billion in pharma exports by 2047.
That's a huge jump. I mean, we all kind of know India is the, pharmacy of the world, but they're really looking to shift, right? Like from volume to value. It's not just about like churning out tons of generic pills anymore.
Exactly. Like right now, India's share of the whole global pharma market, which is like $1.6 trillion, and only have about 3% of that. And their goal is to reach 5% by 2030. And that means, moving into those higher value products like biosimilars and innovative therapies.
So how are they planning to like pull off this huge transformation? The report talks about 7 megatrends that are going to shape India's pharma future. So where do we even begin with that?
Well, I think two of the most interesting trends, at least for me, are the focus on R&D and quality, and then also that growing regulatory harmonization. And those two are like really connected and super important for India's success.
Okay, let's break that down. What's the story with R&D and quality?
Well, so think of it this way, like India has been known for producing affordable generics, which is fantastic for accessibility. But to like play in the big leagues, they need to step up their game on innovation and quality. And the report shows that Indian pharma companies are they're starting to spend more on R&D, and they're really trying to meet like those stricter global quality standards.
But I mean, global standards, they're always evolving, right?
Yeah.
So how is India keeping up with that moving target?
That's where regulatory harmonization comes in. As those global regulations become more aligned, I guess it gets easier for Indian companies to enter new markets, without having to jump through all these different hoops. And they're actually working towards like joining organizations like ICH and PICS, which are like, the gold standard for pharmaceutical quality and regulation.
So it's like a two-pronged approach, right? They're improving their own quality while also like figuring out how to navigate that global regulatory maze. That makes sense. But what does this like actually look like? Are there any examples of Indian companies kind of taking the lead here?
Oh, absolutely. Zydus Life Sciences, they're a great example. They've developed a new drug, saraglitazar, entirely in India, and it's to treat fatty liver disease. And it's not just, a copycat generic. This is a novel drug, and it really shows their growing R&D capabilities.
Wow. So developing a completely new drug in-house, that's a major step. What about on the regulatory side? How are Indian companies, breaking into those global markets?
Well, take Biological E, for example. They've partnered with Johnson & Johnson to manufacture their COVID-19 vaccine, which is, that's a big deal. It shows that they can meet those really strict quality requirements of like a global giant and really play a key role in vaccine production for those high-income markets.
So it's a mix of, developing their own products, but also strategically partnering with those global players to kind of, gain a foothold. Okay, so what about those opportunities by segment that the report highlights? Let's dive into those, starting with APIs and generics.
Okay, so APIs, or active pharmaceutical ingredients, are basically, the raw materials for making drugs. And India is already a major exporter, but there's a catch. They still rely pretty heavily on China for imports of those raw materials.
So it's like a bottleneck, right? Yeah. They're a leader in exporting those finished generics, but they're dependent on another country for those key ingredients. So what's the plan to address that?
Well, the report highlights the importance of something called backward integration, meaning that they need to invest in producing those critical starting materials themselves, and it also emphasizes moving towards something called specialty generics, which are they're more complex formulations that can command higher prices and offer better profit margins. I think things like injectables, inhalers, or those specialized drug delivery systems.
So it's about taking more control of their supply chain.
Yeah.
and kind of moving up the value chain, even within that generic segment. Okay, so what about biosimilars? That's a hot topic these days.
Definitely. So biosimilars, they're basically like, the generic versions of those really complex biologic drugs. And the market for biosimilars, it's expected to hit $100 billion by 2030. And India wants a bigger piece of that.
But I mean, breaking into biosimilars, that's not easy, right? There's a lot of competition from those established players.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. They're going to need to speed up their drug development timelines because, the first companies to market, they often, they win big. And they also need to figure out, innovative ways to market those biosimilars and really, prove that they meet those high global quality standards.
So it's like a race against time and a battle for credibility. Okay, let's talk vaccines. India is already a major vaccine producer, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They're a leading supplier to those low-income countries. They've been like UNICEF's largest vaccine supplier for years, so they've got the volume down pat. But the value, that's where they're lagging behind.
Oh, that's interesting. So they're making a huge impact on global health, but they're not necessarily like reaping those financial rewards. So how do they change that?
Well, the report talks about targeting high-income countries with adult vaccines. It's a market that's growing really fast, but to do this, they'll need to demonstrate that their manufacturing meets those top international standards and really build trust with healthcare professionals and the public in those countries.
So it's about building that brand India for vaccines.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to what the report calls the final frontier innovative products.
Yeah, so this is where India is aiming to become a true innovator, developing new drugs from scratch, not just generics or biosimilars. It's a whole different ballgame.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
What are some of the key challenges that they face in kind of cracking this final frontier?
Well, the cost and complexity of drug development is enormous. It takes years of research, millions of dollars in investment, and a high tolerance for risk. And they're entering a market that's dominated by these huge established pharmaceutical companies.
So how do they even begin to compete with those giants? It feels like David versus Goliath.
Yeah, they're really focusing on building up their R&D capabilities, attracting that top scientific talent, and being really strategic about their research priorities. Instead of trying to compete head on with those giants, they're targeting those therapeutic areas where there's a high unmet medical need, like rare diseases or certain types of cancers.
Smart move. So focusing on those kind of niche areas where there's less competition and potentially a higher return on investment, but going it alone in such a complex field, that can't be easy.
No, and that's why they're also leveraging partnerships, collaborating with those global pharmaceutical companies, biotech firms, and academic institutions allows them to access, those cutting-edge technologies and expertise. They're also kind of moving away from just licensing other companies' drugs, and they're exploring models where they develop those drugs in-house and then partner with global companies for those later stages like commercialization.
So it's a multifaceted approach.
Yeah.
Building their own expertise, but also like strategically partnering to accelerate their progress. This is really fascinating stuff. But we can't ignore the elephant in the room, right? What are some of the roadblocks, the challenges that they might encounter on this path to pharma dominance? Yeah, we were just talking about those roadblocks and challenges. Let's get real here for a second. What are some of the big obstacles that India might face on this journey to becoming a global pharma powerhouse?
Yeah, right. No journey's perfect. There's always going to be some bumps in the road, and I think one of the big ones for India is those lingering concerns about quality. They've made progress for sure, but there's still work to do to really consistently meet those high expectations of regulators and consumers. Especially in those high-income countries.
Yeah, it's like building a brand reputation from scratch, right?
Yeah.
How do they convince the world that made in India means top-notch quality when it comes to something as critical as as medicine.
Well, they're tackling this head on. The Indian government, they're tightening regulations for manufacturing facilities, enforcing stricter penalties for violations,
Hmm.
and really pushing for the adoption of those international quality standards.
So it's like a top-down approach
Right.
from the government, which makes sense. But what about the companies themselves? Are they stepping up to meet those higher standards?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of Indian pharma companies are realizing that, quality is not just a box to tick. It's a core business strategy. So they're investing in, those advanced technologies for quality control. They're getting those international certifications, and they're really, embedding that quality first mindset into their operations.
That's good to hear.
Hmm.
But even with, top-notch quality, breaking into that global market,
Yeah.
it's not easy. The report also mentioned, regulatory hurdles. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Oh yeah, the regulatory maze can be a real headache. It's like every country has its own set of rules and regulations for approving drugs, and they can be wildly different in terms of complexity. So Indian companies really need to become experts at navigating those diverse regulatory pathways.
Yeah, that sounds like a massive undertaking. So how are they even like approaching something like that?
Well, they're getting strategic. They're building strong relationships with those regulatory agencies around the world. They're doing their homework, to understand those specific requirements in different countries, and they're even hiring regulatory experts who can help them cut through that red tape.
So it's like they're building this global regulatory playbook, like figuring out how to win the game in each specific market.
Yeah.
Um, okay, but even with the best strategy,
Yeah.
you need resources, right? What about funding? Is that a major roadblock for Indian companies?
Funding is definitely a challenge, especially for those companies trying to break into that innovative product segment. Developing new drugs is incredibly expensive, and access to capital isn't always easy. Particularly for smaller companies or startups.
So how are they overcoming that hurdle? Are there any signs of a shift in the funding landscape?
Well, the government has definitely stepped up to the plate with initiatives like the production linked incentive scheme, the PLI scheme. It offers financial incentives to companies that are manufacturing specific pharmaceuticals in India. So it's making it more attractive to invest there.
Yeah, it's a way to kind of sweeten the deal
Uh-huh.
and attract both domestic and foreign investment. So smart move. But it's not just about throwing money at the problem, right?
No, you're right. It's also about creating that supportive ecosystem where innovation can flourish, and that's why they're setting up these dedicated pharmaceutical parks with shared facilities and resources. Think of it like a tech hub, but for pharma.
Yeah.
It helps reduce costs and it streamlines that process of setting up manufacturing units.
That's a really cool idea. It's creating a sense of community and shared purpose, and it probably helps attract talent too. Speaking of talent, we touched on that earlier. Is India facing any challenges in terms of finding and keeping
Where
the right people to drive this pharma revolution?
Yeah. Talent is the lifeblood of any innovative industry, and India is no exception. While they do have, this large pool of skilled scientists and engineers, they need to make sure that they're attracting, that top talent
Yeah.
in those specialized areas like biopharmaceuticals or cell and gene therapies and
Yeah.
and AI driven drug discovery.
So it's not just about quantity; it's about quality when it comes to talent. What are they doing to address that?
Well, they're pulling out all the stops. They've got programs to, lure back those talented Indian scientists who've, been working abroad,
Oh.
offering, financial incentives and research grants to entice them to, to come back and contribute.
Yeah, makes
Like how-
sense. Bring back the brain power. But what about nurturing that next generation of pharma leaders?
Yeah, they're investing heavily in training and development programs. Think specialized courses, workshops, and collaborations with those international institutions. to upskill their workforce and equip them for those ever evolving demands of the pharma industry.
Yeah, it's like they're building a pharma talent pipeline, right? Making sure they've got that steady stream of skilled professionals to fuel their growth. So this is all incredibly impressive. But we've mainly been focusing on kind of that domestic landscape. So let's zoom out and look at the global picture. How is India positioning itself on the world stage, and what kind of impact are these ambitions likely to have?
That's a great question. I think India's pharma ambitions have the potential to really shake things up globally. One of the most significant impacts could be increased access to those affordable medicines, especially for those low and middle income countries.
So it's about making those life-saving drugs more accessible to people who need the most, regardless of their income level. That's a powerful goal.
Exactly. India has always been a champion of those affordable generics, and as they expand into those higher value segments like biosimilars and innovative products, they're likely to continue offering those competitive prices, and this could be a real game changer for global healthcare equity.
Yeah, it's like leveling the playing field, right? Making sure everyone has a chance at a healthy life, but greater access to affordable medicines. That's just one piece of the puzzle. What other kind of ripple effects might India's pharma ambitions create?
Well, think about the implications for the global pharma market itself. More competition from India could actually push down prices and force those big multinational companies to innovate faster and become more efficient.
So it's like a wake-up call for the industry, right?
Yeah.
A challenge to the status quo that could ultimately benefit patients worldwide.
Precisely. And it's not just about competition. India's success could also inspire, other developing countries to invest in their own pharmaceutical industries. And this could lead to a more, decentralized and resilient global healthcare system.
That's a really interesting point. So instead of, relying on just a handful of countries for those essential medicines, we'd have a more diversified and robust global supply chain. But let's get down to brass tacks here. What does this mean for the average person, the everyday consumer of healthcare? How might India's pharma ambitions affect their lives directly?
Well, for starters, it could mean, greater access to those life-saving medications without, breaking the bank. Imagine being able to afford the latest cancer treatments or having access to biosimilars for chronic conditions at a fraction of the current cost.
Yeah, that would be life-changing for so many people. It's about putting those essential medications within reach, not just for the wealthy, but for everyone who needs them.
Exactly. And it's not just about, cost. Increased competition could also mean, more choices for patients. They'd have access to, a wider range of treatment options, giving them, more control over their healthcare decisions.
So it's about, empowering patients, making them, active participants in their own healthcare journey.
Yeah.
But what about those cutting edge therapies, those scientific breakthroughs that offer, hope for previously incurable diseases? How does India kind of fit into that picture?
Well, India's focus on innovation, particularly in areas like biopharmaceuticals, could lead to the development of entirely new treatments for diseases that currently have limited or ineffective options. Imagine new therapies for Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or even HIV, diseases that currently have no cure. Yeah, that's a powerful image. It's about giving hope to those who are suffering, offering them the possibility of a brighter future. But let's be realistic here, right? We've talked about all these potential benefits, but surely there are some concerns too. So what are some of the things that people are worried about, and are those worries justified?
You're right. I think it's important to acknowledge that not everyone is thrilled about India's rise in the pharmaceutical world. Some people do express concerns about quality control, intellectual property protection, and the potential for market disruption.
Okay, let's address those one by one. We've already talked about, the progress India is making on the quality control front. What about intellectual property protection? That's a huge issue in the pharmaceutical industry, right? Where companies invest, billions in research and development.
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable that, companies in those high income countries might be worried about losing their competitive edge. And there have been some past instances, where Indian companies were accused of violating intellectual property rights, which created, some
So there's a history of mistrust there. But how is that evolving? What are they doing to kind of address those concerns?
Well, India has taken, significant steps to strengthen its intellectual property laws and those enforcement mechanisms. They've joined those international treaties, and they're really aligning their patent laws with those global standards.
So they're trying to kind of, assure the world that they respect intellectual property rights, and they're serious about playing by the rules.
Yeah.
But what about those Indian companies themselves? Are they kind of shifting their mindset?
Oh, absolutely. I think a lot of Indian companies are now focusing on, developing their own innovative products and filing their own patents. They're realizing that, protecting intellectual property isn't just about avoiding lawsuits. It's also about attracting that foreign investment and fostering a culture of innovation within India.
So it's a win-win, right? They protect intellectual property, they build trust with global partners, and they create an environment where innovation can flourish. But let's not forget about market disruption. That's a common concern when a new player enters an established industry.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the potential downsides there?
It's true that India's entry into the global market could shake things up a bit. Existing pharmaceutical companies, especially those enjoying those high profit margins, might see their profits shrink as competition increases.
Yeah, so it's a challenge to the status quo.
Yeah.
Which can be unsettling for those who benefit from the existing power structure.
Yeah.
Right? But how do we weigh those concerns against the potential benefits for patients?
That's the key question. While market disruption can create winners and losers, from a broader perspective, I think increased competition often leads to better products, lower prices, and more choices for consumers.
So it's about shifting the focus from profits to patients, from protecting the interests of those established companies to prioritizing the needs of people who need affordable and effective medicines. But is it really a zero-sum game? Does India's gain have to come at the expense of others?
Not necessarily. The pharmaceutical industry is vast, and there's room for multiple players to thrive. I think India's entry into the market could actually expand the pie, so to speak, creating new opportunities for collaboration, partnerships, and joint ventures.
So it's not about India versus the rest of the world. It's about finding ways to work together, to leverage each other's strengths, and to create a global healthcare system that truly serves the needs of all people. We've covered a lot of ground here, but I feel like we've only scratched the surface of this complex and fascinating topic. What are some of the ethical and regulatory complexities that we need to consider as India continues on this path to becoming a global pharma powerhouse?
Yeah, we were talking about some of those ethical and regulatory complexities, right, surrounding India's, rise as this global pharma player, and it's a tricky thing, right? Celebrating that potential to make medicines more accessible, but also making sure that quality and safety aren't compromised in the process.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. It really is a balancing act, and it's so important to have these open and honest conversations about those complexities. We can't just assume that affordable medicines automatically translate to subpar quality.
Right. That's a dangerous generalization.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure that those two goals, like affordability and quality, aren't at odds with each other?
Well, I think strong regulatory oversight is absolutely essential. India's definitely made progress in strengthening its regulatory systems, but continuous improvement is key. We need those robust mechanisms in place to ensure that manufacturing standards are upheld, clinical trials are conducted ethically, and that drug safety remains a top priority.
Yeah, it sounds like it's not just about, having rules in place, but it's about, enforcing them effectively and holding companies accountable. What role do the pharmaceutical companies themselves play in all of this?
I think they have a huge responsibility here. Fostering a culture of transparency within the industry is crucial. Companies need to be open about their manufacturing processes, their clinical trial data, and their pricing strategies. Building trust with patients and healthcare providers is just as important as satisfying investors and regulators.
Transparency and trust, those are cornerstones of any ethical and sustainable industry, especially when we're talking about people's health and well-being. But it's not solely on the company's shoulders, right?
Yeah.
What about the role of governments and international organizations in kind of navigating these ethical waters?
Yeah, they play a really crucial role in setting standards, providing oversight, and ensuring a level playing field, collaboration between governments, regulatory bodies, and those industry stakeholders is essential to really strike that balance between innovation, affordability, and safety.
Yeah, it sounds like it really requires a global effort, a shared understanding that we're all kind of working towards the same goal, which is, a healthier world where everyone has access to safe and effective medicines. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about that regulatory maze again. Earlier we mentioned those challenges that Indian companies face in getting their products approved in different markets. Can you unpack that a little bit more?
Oh yeah, the regulatory landscape is a beast. It's like every country has its own language when it comes to drug approvals. The requirements can be, vastly different from the types of clinical trials needed to the documentation and labeling standards. It's a complex and ever-changing puzzle.
Yeah. So for Indian companies that are aiming for, that global presence, it's not just about developing a great drug, right? It's about mastering the art of regulatory compliance in multiple markets.
Exactly. They can't just, rely on approvals from Indian regulators. They need to tailor their strategies to meet those specific requirements in each country they target. And it can be a costly and time-consuming process, but it's a necessary one to gain access to those global markets.
Yeah, it sounds like a real strategic game.
Yeah.
Figuring out how to navigate those regulatory hurdles efficiently and effectively. But looking, beyond those immediate challenges, I'm curious about what's next for the pharmaceutical industry as a whole. What are some of the big trends and innovations that are going to shape the future of pharma, both in India and globally?
Oh, there's so much happening. One of the most exciting areas, I think, is personalized medicine. Imagine treatments that are tailored to an individual's, unique genetic makeup and lifestyle. We're moving away from that one size fits all approach to healthcare.
It's incredible. It's like medicine is becoming bespoke, right? Customized to each individual's needs. What's driving this shift towards personalized medicine?
Well, it's all about those amazing advances in fields like genomics, proteomics, and bioinformatics. We're really unraveling the mysteries of the human body at a molecular level, understanding that complex interplay of genes and environment on health.
It's like unlocking the secrets of life itself. It feels like we're on the cusp of a healthcare revolution.
We are. And alongside personalized medicine, we're also seeing the rise of digital health, using technology to transform healthcare delivery and patient engagement. Think telemedicine, wearable health trackers, and apps that can help manage chronic conditions.
Yeah, it feels like technology is revolutionizing every every aspect of our lives
Yeah.
these days. And healthcare is no exception.
Absolutely. Digital health has the potential to make healthcare, more accessible, more affordable, and more patient-centered. It can really empower people to take control of their own health and well-being.
Those are some pretty transformative trends. Are there any other areas where we're seeing kind of like major breakthroughs?
Biopharmaceuticals is another, hotbed of innovation. We're talking about, drugs that are derived from living organisms, things like monoclonal antibodies, gene therapies, and cell therapies. And these are showing, remarkable promise in treating a wide range of diseases, from cancer to autoimmune disorders.
Yeah, these are those cutting edge therapies that were once considered science fiction, and now they're becoming a reality.
They are, and India, with its strong foundation in biotechnology, and a growing number of companies investing in this area, are well positioned to be a major player in this biopharmaceutical revolution.
It's incredible to think about the potential that these innovations hold, right? To improve human health and alleviate suffering. It feels like we're entering a new era of medicine. As we wrap up this deep dive into India's pharma future, I'm left with a mix of excitement and a healthy dose of curiosity about what the future holds.
Me too. I think India's journey is a real testament to their ambition and their willingness to embrace innovation. It's a story that's still being written, and it's one that has the potential to impact all of us.
This has been an incredible exploration. We've covered so much ground, from India's bold ambitions to those ethical and regulatory complexities of the global pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating conversation, and I think we've just scratched the surface.
I agree, and as India continues on this path to becoming a global pharma powerhouse, it raises some important questions, I think, for all of us to consider, right? Like what does it mean for access to those affordable medicines? How will it impact the global balance of power in the pharmaceutical industry, and perhaps most importantly, how will it shape the future of healthcare for people around the world?
Those are the questions that we need to keep asking as this story unfolds.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's sparked your curiosity and given you some food for thought. Until next time, keep seeking knowledge, keep asking questions, and keep exploring the world with a curious mind.